She was not only my mother, she was my best friend.
For Arkica Hayes,
she was someone that I see and talk to every single day. I miss her presence.
She was shot. And while her blood was soaking through her seat, while bullets had already torn through her car, while her body was failing her one breath at a time, she picked up her phone. She called 911. And she stayed on that line describing her attackers, telling dispatchers exactly what was happening until she couldn't anymore. Her name was Arkica Stewart. She was 41 years old, a mother, a best friend, a woman who, even in her final moments, chose justice over surrender. Her bravery handed law enforcement the roadmap they needed. Her words spoken through pain and fear on that 911 call pointed directly to her killers. But here's where this story takes a turn that will make your stomach drop. 2 of the suspects connected to her murder arrested because of what Arkica told police were later released. Back into the community. Back into Holmes County, Mississippi, the same county where Arkica's daughter lives. The same roads her family drives every day. Not because they were found innocent. Not because the case fell apart. Because of a paperwork error. A clerical mistake. A miscommunication between a justice court and a sheriff's department. And for nearly 3 weeks, they were gone. A woman risked everything and still gave her life to make sure justice would be served. And the system she trusted blinked. How does that happen, and what does it mean for every victim who's ever fought back? Stay with me because we are going all the way through this case tonight. Every detail, every failure, every name. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button right now. If you're on Instagram or Facebook, follow us at Red Rage Crime TV. We document the cases that slip through the cracks and we don't stop until the full story is told. Links are in the description. Now let's talk about who Arkica Stewart really was. Before we go deeper into Arkica's story, I need to take 2 minutes to explain something because the system failure at the center of this case is not complicated. But it is inexcusable. When someone is arrested and charged with a crime in Mississippi or in most states in this country, a judge sets bond. That's the amount of money a defendant must pay to be released from jail while they await trial. The purpose is simple: ensure they show up to court. High risk, high bond. Lower risk, lower bond. In theory, it's a calculated decision. Now here's where it gets important. There are different types of bond. A surety bond, also called a percentage bond, means the defendant only pays a fraction of the total amount, usually through a bail bondsman. A cash bond means the full amount must be paid in cash, directly to the court. No bondsman, no percentage, the full dollar amount up front. Cash bonds are typically set for higher risk defendants. People the court believes are more likely to flee or pose a danger. The full cash requirement is a deliberate barrier designed to keep dangerous individuals off the street. This system is supposed to work like this. The judge sets the bond and specifies the type. That information is immediately communicated to the jail and the sheriff's department. No one is released until the correct bond in the correct form is paid. That communication step, that one handoff of information between the court and the detention facility, that is exactly where the system broke in the case of Arkica Stewart's killers. And the result was devastating. Arkica Stewart, known to everyone who loved her as Punkin, was a 41-year-old woman from Lexington, Mississippi, Holmes County, a quiet part of the state where everybody knows everybody, where family runs deep and community means something real. Arkica was a mother of 3. And according to every single person who knew her, she was the kind of woman who showed up, full stop. One friend posted after her death, "She was literally the life of any party. I don't care what event anybody was having, if don't nobody show up, you could count on Punkin to be there. It ain't nothing that I asked her to do for me that she didn't do. She never said no. She showed up for everybody." Another described her as someone whose love for her children was always visible. The way she cared for the people around her. One post read, "Will never be forgotten. She leaves behind a beautiful legacy through the lives she touched."
My cousin's gonna get up and eat that shit up. Get him, Punkin. Get him. Where you at, Keith? I don't know. Y'all gotta do more than that.
And her daughter, Arkica Hayes, said it simply and completely. She was not only my mother, she was my best friend. She was someone that I seen and talked to every single day. I miss her presence.
She was not only my mother, she was my best friend.
For Arkica Hayes,
She was someone that I seen and talked to every single day. I miss her presence.
she's still grappling with the loss of her mother, Arkica Stewart. She was driving along Highway 17 in Lexington when a gunman shot into the back of her car, killing her. It happened on March 14th. The family put up this memorial in honor of the 41-year-old.
But Arkica had also known profound grief before March 14, 2026. In 2021, she lost her grandchild, a baby boy, and she carried that loss every single day. In a post she shared publicly, the kind of post that shows you who someone really is in their quietest moments. Arkica wrote, "I've been emotional all day just thinking about, if you were here, how you would have wanted to celebrate your birthday today. I won't question God, but I just wish he would have loaned you to us a little while longer, 'cause Granny had big plans for you, my love. I miss you so much, baby. Happy heavenly 6th birthday." A grandmother, grieving her grandchild, writing love letters to a little boy who wasn't here anymore. And now she's gone too. It was March 14th, 2026, a date that the Stewart family will carry for the rest of their lives. Arkica was driving along Highway 17 in Lexington, Mississippi, a road she'd driven hundreds of times, a normal drive, nothing out of the ordinary. And then without warning, gunfire erupted from behind her vehicle. A gunman opened fire directly into the back of her car, multiple rounds. In an instant, her drive home became a crime scene. Here is what makes Arkica Stewart's story unlike almost any other you will hear. She was hit, she was bleeding, she was dying. And she called 911. Not after, not when it was over, not from a hospital bed. She called during the shooting, while it was happening. And according to her daughter, she stayed on the line with the dispatcher, calmly, deliberately telling them that someone was shooting at her from behind, that she had been shot. She described what was happening around her. Arkica Hayes said, "She actually called the call-in herself to let the dispatcher know that somebody was shooting behind her and that she had got shot." Think about the level of composure that requires. Think about what it takes in those final moments to set aside your own terror and think about justice, about accountability, about making sure the people who did this don't get away with it. Arkica Stewart did not survive. She was pronounced dead from her gunshot wounds. But what she did on that call, the information she gave, directly led law enforcement to her killers. This is where the system was supposed to pick up the baton she passed. In the days following the shooting, law enforcement moved quickly. Using helicopters and ground resources, investigators tracked down 3 suspects connected to Arkica's death. The first was 22-year-old Octavius Small. He was charged with murder as the gunman directly responsible for the attack. Small was taken into custody and remained behind bars. The second and third suspects, Cordell Thomas, 17 years old, and Javarius Gibson, were charged with accessory after the fact, meaning they were accused of helping to cover up the crime, assisting those responsible, and obstructing justice. 3 arrests. A murder charge, accessory charges. It looked like justice was moving forward. This is where the system blinked. At some point after the arrests of Cordell Thomas and Javarius Gibson, their bond was processed. The judge had set it at $50,000. Cash bond, meaning every cent had to be paid in full before release. But here's what happened. The Justice Court communicated the amount of the bond to the detention facility. They said $50,000. What they failed to communicate, what got lost somewhere in that handoff, was that it was a cash bond. Holmes County Sheriff Willie March explained it this way. The Justice Court informed them the bond of the two young men was going to be $50,000. They never told them it was going to be a cash bond. Once they made that bond and we found out it was a cash bond, I spoke with the judge and he advised us we need to pick them back up.
And the Justice Court informed them that the bond of the two young men is going to be $50,000. They never did tell them it's going to be a cash bond. And once they made that bond and we found out that it was a cash bond, then I spoke with the judge and he advised us that, we need to pick them back up. I'm very concerned the way the young lady was targeted and killed, that it was a hideous crime, so I think they need to be back in jail.
So Thomas and Gibson, charged in connection with the murder of a woman who died on the phone with 911, posted bond through a bondsman, which they should never have been able to do. And they walked out. Back into Holmes County, back into the same community where Arkica's family lives, where her daughter drives, where her loved ones grieve. Arkica Hayes found out, and the fear that followed her grief was immediate and visceral. The last thing the sheriff reported is that they were still around Holmes County. We live in Holmes County, so I'm afraid that myself or my family members will see these guys, and the same thing will happen to us.
Honor of the 41-year-old.
She actually called the call-in herself to let the dispatcher know that somebody was shooting behind her.
Last thing the sheriff reported that they were still around Holmes County. We live in Holmes County. So I'm afraid that myself or my family member would see these guys and the same thing would happen to us.
Let that sink in. A daughter who just lost her mother, afraid for her own life because of a paperwork error. This is our breakdown audit, and I want to be clear, this section is not about assigning blame for blame's sake. It is about accountability, about naming specific failures so they cannot be explained away. Because Arkica Stewart deserved better than this. And so does every other family waiting for justice in this country. The Justice Court set a cash bond of $50,000. That critical distinction, cash, was never relayed to the detention facility or the sheriff's office. What policy required standard judicial procedure mandates that bond type and conditions be explicitly documented and transmitted to all involved agencies simultaneously? A cash bond designation is not a footnote. It is a primary condition of release. Who was responsible? Both the Justice Court staff responsible for transmitting bond conditions and the intake staff at the Sheriff's Department responsible for verifying them before processing release. Thomas and Gibson were released after posting bond through a bondsman, a method that should not have been accepted, given the cash bond designation. What policy required before any defendant is released? Detention staff should be required to cross-reference the bond type recorded by the court. If any discrepancy exists between the amount posted and the designated bond type, release should be halted, pending clarification. Who is responsible? The detention facility staff who processed the release without confirming bond type with the court. What happened once the error was discovered? Thomas and Gibson were not immediately taken back into custody. They remained free for nearly 3 weeks, during which time they were reportedly still in Holmes County. What policy required an unlawful release should trigger an immediate warrant and rapid apprehension protocol? The timeline between discovery of the error and rearrest stretched far beyond what any victim's family should be expected to tolerate. The consequences for the family: Arkica Hayes was left living in fear, afraid to move through her own community for weeks, while the men connected to her mother's death were free. Cordell Thomas, 17 years old and charged with accessory after the fact in a murder, made his way out of Mississippi entirely. He was ultimately located in Waterloo, Iowa, and arrested by U.S. Marshals from the Northern District of Iowa. He was taken to Black Hawk County Jail to await extradition. What this tells us: the 3-week window created by the bond error gave suspects more than enough time to flee across state lines. One of them used it. At the time of this reporting, Javarius Gibson had not yet been recaptured. After the error was discovered, Holmes County Sheriff Willie March confirmed his department was working with U.S. Marshals to track down both Thomas and Gibson. He didn't mince words. "I'm very concerned with the way the young lady was targeted and killed. It was a hideous crime, so I think they need to be back in jail." Cordell Thomas was recaptured in Iowa. One suspect justice moving slowly in the right direction. Octavius Small, charged with murder, remained behind bars throughout. But for Arkica's family, recapture is not the same as healing. Not the same as accountability. Not the same as reform. Her daughter Arkica said it plainly. These individuals are not being held accountable for what they did. They took a life. An innocent person's life. They took a mother, a family member, a loving person. A person that didn't bother anybody. A person that was traveling down Highway 17 that wasn't even bothering anyone. They took a life. And then she posted something that stopped me cold when I read it. She wrote, "This is the hardest battle I've ever faced in my life, and I refuse to back down. I will not rest. I will not be silenced. And I will not stop fighting until justice is fully served for my mother. Every single day I stand on her name, her love, and her strength, and I will carry this fight all the way through." That is not the voice of someone who has accepted failure. That is a daughter who is demanding that the system do its job. As for systemic change, Holmes County and Mississippi courts have not yet announced any formal review or policy update in response to this bond processing failure. The same communication gap that allowed Thomas and Gibson to walk free could happen again tomorrow, in this county or any other. That is not acceptable. The reforms needed are not complicated. A mandatory dual verification system for bond type at the point of release. An immediate escalation protocol when bond condition errors are discovered. A rapid rearrest timeline with accountability measures attached. These are not radical ideas, they are basic safeguards, and Arkica Stewart's death and her family's suffering are the cost of not having them in place. I want to take a moment before we close to let the people who loved Arkica speak for themselves, because no true crime story should reduce a human being to a victim. Arkica Stewart was a person, fully, completely, irreplaceably a person. Her best friend from high school posted, "We've been best friends ever since high school. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Every time we see each other, we call each other best friend. This hurt me so bad for me to find out at work." A cousin and sister figure wrote, "I went to see my sister today for the last time on this earth, and when I tell you it cut like a knife. I have a message. Please love on your people while they are here, alive and well. Because you never know when the last day will come. This one hits different because she was taken away. I love you, baby girl. Always and forever. You were not just family, you were my friend." And from a family friend, Arkica Moore was truly a special woman. The love she had for her children was always clear. She leaves behind a beautiful legacy through the lives she touched. Arkica was laid to rest on March 28, 2026 at Saints Academy in Lexington. Her family chose lavender, white, and a touch of hot pink, her colors. A balloon release was held on Love Road. Love Road, that's where they honored her, and that feels right. Here are the questions I keep coming back to, and I think you are too. How is it that a woman can die on the phone with 911 providing law enforcement with a gift that most investigators never get, and the case still ends up derailed by an administrative error? If a cash bond designation can simply not be transmitted to the facility responsible for holding defendants, what exactly is the point of a cash bond? And if a 17-year-old accessory suspect can leave the state of Mississippi while on an unlawfully processed bond in a murder case, what is the monitoring protocol? Who is responsible for ensuring that doesn't happen? Here's what I believe. Arkica Stewart did her part. She gave everything she had, she made the call, she stayed on the line, she handed justice a map. The system's job was to follow through, and in this case the system did not hold up its end of that bargain. That matters, for Arkica, for her daughter who is fighting every single day, for every victim who has ever trusted that their bravery would be met with competence on the other side. We owe them better than this. At Reg Crime TV, we don't just tell the story. We track what changed. The case of Arkica Stewart is not closed. The trial of Octavia Small is ongoing. Javarius Gibson at the time of this episode remains at large. Cordell Thomas has been extradited back to Mississippi. And the bond processing failure that allowed all of this chaos has, as of now, triggered no formal policy review in Holmes County. We will update this case as it develops. We will be here when the trial begins. We will be here if and when Gibson is apprehended. We will be here for every hearing, every verdict, every development because Arkica Hayes said she won't stop fighting, and neither will we. If you're watching this and you have any information about the whereabouts of Javarius Gibson, you are asked to contact the Holmes County Sheriff's Department at 662-834-1511. Tips can be reported anonymously. And if this video moved you, if this story made you feel something, the most powerful thing you can do right now is share it. Put it on your page. Send it to someone. Because awareness is the first step, and Arkica Stewart's name deserves to be known. Subscribe to Reg Crime TV on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Links are in the description. Drop a comment below and tell me what question do you want answered as this case continues. I'm going to leave you with her daughter's words because nothing I could write comes close.
Thanks, CJ. A Holmes County family says they don't feel safe tonight after two suspects were released under the wrong bond conditions. 41-year-old Arkica Stewart was shot and killed last month in Lexington, and tonight her family is outraged and demanding answers on how this happened. Now, Cordell Thomas and Javarius Gibson are charged with accessory after the fact. They've been out of jail for nearly 3 weeks now. Quentin Smith talked with Stewart's family. And Quentin, what are they saying about this mistake?
Well, Howard, they fear they could run into Gibson and Thomas, which is why they want them back behind bars right away. Their frustration grows each day the two remain out on the streets. Now, the sheriff says he's already working to bring the suspects back into custody, but for Stewart's family, it can't come soon enough.
She was not only my mother, she was my best friend.
For Arkica Hayes,
She was someone that I see and talk to every single day. I miss her presence.
she's still grappling with the loss of her mother, Arkica Stewart. She was driving along Highway 17 in Lexington when a gunman shot into the back of her car, killing her. It happened on March 14th. The family put up this memorial in honor of the 41-year-old.
She actually called the call-in herself to let the dispatcher know that somebody was shooting behind her and that she had got shot.
Devastated by this tragedy, Hayes says the pain cuts even deeper knowing Cordell Thomas and Javarius Gibson, two suspects charged in the killing, are out on the streets due to a paperwork mix-up.
Last thing the sheriff reported that they were still around Holmes County. We live in Holmes County. So I'm afraid that myself or my family member would see these guys and the same thing would happen to us.
When it comes to how this mistake happened, Sheriff Willie March says it was miscommunication between the Justice Court and his department.
The Justice Court informed them that the bond on the two young men is going to be $50,000. They never did tell them it's going to be a cash bond. And once they made that bond and we found out that it was a cash bond, then I spoke with the judge and he advised us that, we need to pick them back up.
The sheriff says they're working with the U.S. Marshals to track down Gibson and Thomas to bring them back into custody. Meanwhile, Hayes says time is of the essence.
I'm very concerned the way the young lady was targeted and killed, that it was a hideous crime, so I think they need to be back in jail.
Now, a third suspect was also arrested in this crime, 22-year-old Octavia Small. He is charged with murder and remains behind bars tonight. When it comes to Thomas and Gibson, if you have any information on where they could be, you are asked to contact the Sheriff's Department. And remember, you can report anonymously. Quentin Smith, 3 on your side.
U.S. Marshals in Iowa say they arrested a 17-year-old who is charged in connection to a deadly shooting in Mississippi. He was released on bond by mistake about 3 weeks ago. U.S. Marshals shared this photo of them taking Cordell Thomas into custody in Waterloo yesterday. Prosecutors charged him with accessory after a shooting last month. Thomas is one of 3 people charged in the death of Arkica Stewart. She was killed when someone shot into the back of her car as she drove along a highway. The Holmes County Sheriff in Mississippi says Thomas and another suspect were released by mistake due to a miscommunication between the court and his department. So far, the other suspect has not been caught.